Hi guys, my name is Lauren Perkins and this is my presentation, The Unwanted Necessity, the Complex Dynamic of Women in Computer Science. Before I jump into my presentation, I wanted to make sure I define the most important part of my entire presentation. Computer science is the study and practice of applied math, engineering, and logic to software, hardware, and artificial intelligence. This means I spent a lot of my time in my major focusing on complicated mathematical algorithms, learning the complexities of programming languages, and how to actively represent both of these skills to a wide variety of audiences. I am one of only a couple active women in my CS classes at the moment, and I've always wondered, why are there no women? Where are all the women? Thomas J. Misa, author of Dynamics of Gender Bias in Computing, connects the drop of women in the field in the 90s to the 1980s and 1990s cultural shifts. The shift happened because of the media's continuous support of personal computing, gendered avatars, and the popularization of male quote-unquote nerds. I obviously wasn't born in the 90s, nor was I raised on 90s TV shows, so I decided to dive in and research what the quote-unquote nerds of the 90s looked like. Top 3 answers: Screech from Saved by the Bell, Steve Urkel from Family Matters, and Stuart Minkus from Boy Meets World. They all look different, come from different backgrounds, but they share some extreme similarities. They're all male nerds in the 90s. All of the women nerds on the list, their characters desperately wanted to stop looking like nerds and look hot instead. Misa called this period hegemonic masculinity, which is the gender practice that guarantees the dominant position of men in subordination of women. Examples of this may be men thinking of themselves higher than some other men that they believe are acting feminine, thinking lowly of women in feminine type roles in society. It makes sense that in this way of thinking, men would be threatened by the presence of women. It ruins their belief that men are better in CS and women can't compare. Now, to save all of our sanity, this graph was given along with the data before, showing the approximation of all the women documented in the companies they work for. The important thing to notice is that women from the 90s and onwards up to the mid-1980s grew in numbers, but they dropped suddenly towards the 90s because of the cultural shifts. Men started believing that women couldn't quote-unquote do computer science as well as the men of the field could, and started driving women out. Men have been defining computer science as something a woman shouldn't and can't do, says author Flynn Coleman, and because of this, the work environment is extremely toxic. Kate Metz, a reporter for the New York Times, agreed, saying that for the women that choose computer science, they can end up in school and work environments that are inhospitable. And not only do they have to deal with men's treatment of women, but also a glass ceiling. For women in college classrooms, whenever they do speak, they're more likely to be interrupted, they're likely to speak for shorter periods of time than their classmates, and it's less likely that instructors will listen to what they have to say, said by Pooja Sankar, a computer science graduate from India who is one of 3 women in her major. Imagine you're sitting in a class, and there's a line of code on the board that you don't understand. You raise your hand to ask for clarification, and when he finally calls on you, you get interrupted mid-question by a guy in the class, or the teacher doesn't even answer the question you ask. It's annoying and very, very frustrating. I wish I could say that it ends with the toxicity of the work environment, but women themselves make the issue worse because of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, stated by Gabriella Nobili and Sophia Lau, both computer science seniors at California Polytech, said that it's the belief that those around them with similar achievements to their own are more deserving. Some examples of this may be believing that all your opportunities were given by you by somebody else and not by your own talent, attacking yourself after you've done well on assignment and believing that it wasn't good enough, and setting extremely unattainable goals and feeling bad when you fail them. In college, Nabili and Lau say that many of these feelings and mindsets stem from that many women coming in with the knowledge of coding, they don't have it. Unlike a lot of guys that come in, they don't have that knowledge, which causes women to feel out of place in their major, and due to being in the minority, women place unhealthy expectations on themselves to perform well. Many women come into the field with the mindset that women plus engineering equals super smart, which is not true. So when women don't feel super smart, they don't feel like they belong, as stated by Jennifer Drake, a journalist who wrote an article about mental health and computer science. Now imagine this. A girl has studied hard by herself and with her friends for a really important test in her programming class. She made Quizlets, practiced writing code, and asked questions to get further understanding. She made study groups, did the assignments with her friends, and showed up for class on time every day. When the test finally came around, she sat down and tried her best, and she still didn't do well. Even though the test was meant to be challenging, she questioned whether or not she belonged in the field. That girl was me. The guys around me were able to get bad grades and not question their place in the program, but I felt guilty and ashamed to come to class the next time for fear of disappointing my teachers, since I was extremely disappointed in myself. But it's not the only women face issue. Even just a lack of other women has caused dramatic effects on women who choose to still join the field. Sinkar says that whenever she struggled with her schoolwork in intense isolation, she watched her male classmates collaborate amongst themselves to collectively master the complicated course material. Women don't want to spend all their college careers surrounded by a quote-unquote sea of dudes, as Coleman put it. Now, I am not saying that men should be eradicated from the field. We need men, but we also need women too. However, with the lack of women, you will lose women that are already in the field. METS acknowledges that women are less likely to enter the field if there are no female role models, mentors, or collaborators. School Jasek, author of the paper Women's Choice Creates Gender Gaps, mentions Linda Sachs and her team of researchers who believe that a lack of role models may play a part and that academic programs should consider ways to make women aware that they can succeed in the field. In the realm of Georgia Southern, only about 15% of the program's graduates are females. The school has only seen an increase from about 13 to 15% in terms of women, and it has sadly plateaued in the past couple years. That's 116 women in a field of 670. If we were to dial that down to our own level, if our class was made up of about 25 kids, that would be the equivalent of about 4 girls in the entire class. 4 girls in a class of 25. I can see why Coleman would call this phenomenon a sea of dudes. And it doesn't get much better than for other schools either. Sinkar says that only about 18% of computer science graduates are female. It's saddening considering, as Coleman puts it, only 9% of leadership positions are filled by women. In my scenario before, if all 25 of us became leaders of companies, that's only about 2 of these leaders being women. Only 2 out of 25. With having no role models, toxic work environments, and intense struggles, and no representation, it makes absolute sense that there is an extreme issue with mental health in CS. Nabili and Lau found at their school, California Polytech State University, 76% of women dealt with a decline in a healthy mental state at some point in their college careers, and 62% of women reported that CS classes caused them anxiety. The overall process to them was mentally destructive, but in terms of growth and knowledge, constructive. However, continuous stress and fight-or-flight responses, as explained by Jennifer Drake, cause the hippocampus to shrink and affect short-term memory and the ability to learn, meaning that women in STEM are more likely to report higher levels of stress and anxiety and depression. That's like trying to work with an arm tied behind your back and blindfolded. Unfortunately, I deal with this every single day, and I have had opportunities where I feel like I was slighted because I was a woman. However, this affects more people than just the women of CS. I challenge each of you to ask these questions in your daily life. Do you see signs of this in your own major? Are there other people that deserve to be there just as much as you do but aren't given the same opportunities as you? And lastly, what can we do? So these are all of my references. I also want to take some time to acknowledge that all of this is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks for watching.